So I guess the first thing to say about this presentation is it's very much aimed at early career researchers or anybody that's quite relatively sort of novice. So whether they're a sort of master's, PhD student or just starting as a researcher or as a lecturer. And I'd also like to thank the previous speaker, Amal, for probably doing a better version of what I'm just about to do. But I think if you are early career, you might find it quite interesting to see the similarities, even though different backgrounds, different contexts, different universities. When I chose this title, I thought I was being quite clever, because what I wanted to say is I kind of bumble around, like academically, I've gone, oh, maybe this, a little bit of that. And I wrote it in a really fancy way. This is the first time the word bumblebees recorded in the English language. And then I realized it was actually quite an unwieldy title, and I regretted it almost after I'd sent the title off. But anyway, so what I'm going to sort of talk about is my sort of trajectory, my sort of pathway, how I've got from very early stages all the way to today. So it's kind of, I think, bear in mind Amal's presentation so you can get the comparisons. And I kind of go back to the beginning, kind of like Fred's presentation, as you'll see in a second. So just a bit about me first. That sounded quite egotistical, but hi, I'm Gareth. I'm a senior lecturer in experience design at Loughborough University. So experience design is not just looking at physical artifacts or digital artifacts, but it's looking at the combination of those and how people interact with them as entities and how it shapes their lives. I've been an academic since 2009 when I started my PhD, made a lecturer in 2015. I had to write that down because I couldn't actually remember when it was. And last year, I was made a senior lecturer. But I think to give that last 13 years a bit of context, I'd kind of like to go a little bit further back. So if we can go back to 1981, so that's me. So I think when you said talk about research journeys, you probably didn't mean go this far back. Don't worry, I'm not going to cover every year of my life. But the thing I just want to sort of start with is my perspective, I guess. So I guess the first thing is to recognize my sort of background and my sort of privilege. So yes, I'm a white male academic from the UK, working within the UK. And that's undoubtedly opened certain doors for me and removed certain barriers in my research career. So I wanted to just sort of acknowledge that to start with. But one of the things that I personally have found challenging is this transition from working class background to middle class, which a lot of academia is, being a middle class academic. So both my parents left school at 14 to go work in factories. So very much they've been for this job for life mentality. And I've often found it's like difficult because you go home and talk to your parents in one way and they go, oh, look at you being all fancy with your big words. And then you'll go to university and you'll talk and they go, oh, look at him being all common with the way he phrases things. So it's always been in this slightly weird middle ground, which I just wanted to say because I think it frames a lot of the decisions that I've made in my career. But I think probably where it's had the biggest impact career-wise is the way I've been strategic or not strategic, I guess, because I've always had this, quoting my mum there, all you can do is try your best. So that's always kind of been my ethos. So I've never had like a 5-year plan or a 10-year plan, or I'm going to do this by this age. It was always, what am I going to do now? That's pretty cool and pretty exciting, which is kind of paid off, but unintentionally. So that's kind of what I did. So, you know, I was good at design. So I did design. I tried my best at design and I happened to be quite good at it. So if I skip forward a few years, sorry, not every year, but yeah, I studied design, product design initially, then industrial design, undergrad and postgrad. And I had a few career false starts. So there was one point after I graduated where I was working in a hospital, folding the letters for people's cancellations of their cancer appointments, which wasn't a great job, but I just want to kind of put that in there, that it doesn't really matter sometimes how good you are. These are the hands that life deals you. But eventually I did get a job as a product designer at a design consultancy, and I worked on things like London Underground train doors, Scale Electrics, which was pretty cool, and single-use medical disposables, as you can see there. So why, you know, I finally made it into design. This is the thing I'm good at. Why did I make the leap to academia? Why did I think that's the career for me? In 2009, I got made redundant, and I wanted job security, and academia at that time offered that. So I'm not going to pretend I had started with this lofty ambition of saving the planet or any of that. That all came later. But it was just the pragmatics of life at that stage. And that's how I actually got into academia, was by speaking to the people that run my masters and saying, do you have a paid job? And they said, no, but we have a PhD. Right, I'll take it. I'm not too fussed in what it's in. Turns out I actually quite enjoyed the thing that it was actually in. So I was a doctoral researcher on the Carbon Control and Comfort Project, which is looking at domestic energy reduction in social housing. And yeah, it was absolutely fascinating. So the theory about behaviour change, why people do what they do, the designing of interventions. So I designed this light that indicates when people's heating's on or not, and then it was combined with the window, so it could change states depending upon if their windows are open or not. Engaging with people. So as somebody said earlier today, working with mining communities can be quite the very interesting communities. So this was in Montfort University in South Wales. So it felt like I'd finally found a sort of meaning and a purpose to design rather than just making stuff. Scale Electrics is cool, but this felt more grounded and real and somehow empowering and something to be proud of. After the PhD, I then worked as an RA on the LEADER project, low effort energy demand reduction project. So this was kind of almost by chance. My colleague got promoted. There was a gap. I took that job. So it was great timing. Again, not really what my PhD was in at all, but I thought it was interesting, an interesting challenge. So I worked with engineers, I worked with social scientists, and I got to understand their methods and their approaches, and had a bit of a play of trying to combine them. So one of the things we worked on was this idea of combining social science ethnographic narrative with this idea of energy data, and can we somehow add that qualitative edge to the quantitative and then create these frames that we can understand in more detail. And then I even learned about UX. So even though now that's what I predominantly teach, back then I didn't really know what it was. So I got to have a play in that space as well. And it was looking at bringing new ideas into the energy sector. So we had a concept like Kairos and Future Self. Future Self is an idea where you basically enter your details of your life, and let's say on LinkedIn or whatever it might be, and then it finds somebody that's basically had your exact same life, but they're 10 years older than you. And then it connects you and you can ask them questions. Should I do this? Should I not do that? Should I put off this investment, etc.? Because it's kind of coming from the inside that the only person people really trust is themselves. So find themselves, but a little bit older and wiser. But anyway, it meant I got to play around with something that was a little bit different, this digital material. And then moved on to the Clever project. So I was a research associate, closed loop emotionally valuable e-waste recovery project. I don't know what it is with all these acronyms for these projects. The Clever project. It's a nightmare to Google. But this time looking at e-waste and mobile phones. And the thing that I was particularly interested in here was, why do people keep phones? So again, not quite connected to my previous stuff, but. And then we did a study where we realized that people typically use a phone for 2 years. That should not really be a surprise to anyone, but then they keep it in their drawer for 3 years. So in other words, of the 5 years you own a phone, most of it isn't even being used. And that could have been given to somebody else and the value used. Then I made made it to be a lecturer. And again, I was fortunate because I happened by that stage to have the right combination of the design skills that I'd learned many years before, but also the research portfolio from having jumped between all these different projects. So I was invited to be the co-investigator of the core project. And again, this was, if you're in early career, I can't advise, to do these things more, but I trained as a STEM ambassador as part of this project, developed a toolkit that went into schools. So this is the Madani Schools Federation in Leicester. You guys probably might know it better than me, I don't know. But it was a Muslim secondary school, and we were working with just the girls' side. And again, it just opened my mind to how people interact and how they talk and conceptions and all these things. It was just really interesting. Although I'd have to say the best bit of it was at the end of this day when we asked them to present back their concepts for new mobile phones. And one of them was like, so they put their hand up and said, "Can we do it in the form of a rap?" And you're like, yes, you can. So, but not something I would have expected. But anyway, what's the point? Why am I sort of saying all this? So it's kind of, I guess, for the early careers to say, yeah, you can be good at what you do, but a lot of it can just be about luck, being in the right place at the right time. So don't think if you're not getting ahead for whatever reason, it's because you're deficit. It might be just the circumstances around you. Some people make that fortune, some people don't. Sometimes it's about who you know, sometimes it's not, etc. So it's just being a bit clear about that. The other thing, and I guess this is similar to what Mar was saying, is be curious, be open to ideas and opportunities that you might not have necessarily thought you would find yourself in. Certainly in Loughborough, it's like you speak to the PhD students, they're like, oh, I'm going to get a job in this exact thing that I'm doing right now. I'm going to be a PI of a team of 20. Everyone's going to give me money. It's going to be great. And you're like, I'm not saying it won't happen. It's just that the journey to that is going to take a little longer than next Tuesday. So I guess it's, again, just be open to these opportunities and ideas. And sometimes you don't see the value in them until you're asked to talk about it. And then you see the retrospective value of the whole thing. And yeah, just expose yourself intellectually to different domains. I, as a designer, found that the best bit is listening to engineers and social scientists. Getting out of my discipline has been the most rewarding and enriching thing. And it means when you're writing proposals as well, if you are playing the strategic game, you know better how to navigate their needs and their values and what they want from projects. It's less butting of heads because you can all kind of understand the same language. So that's kind of led me to today. So I'm just going to, in the sort of last few minutes really, is just talk a little bit about the project that I'm currently leading. So I'm the PI, the Perpetual Plastic for Food to Go project, £1.15 million design-led project to reduce the impact of food to go packaging. We're roughly about halfway through it. It's a 3-year project, so it should end November 23. And we're really investigating the problems and limitations of things like packaging disposal, industry collaboration, enabling technologies. So one of the things that we initially was looking at was just consumer behavior. And even really things that you think would be really simple, like how do you dispose of a sandwich box? These ubiquitous things that are in every single building pretty much in the UK. Even on a questionnaire like that, we had the answers: recycle whole, recycle some, or throw it all away. And the answers were split exactly a third over each of those, which indicates 2/3 do not know what they're doing, irrespective of even what the answer is. So consumer behavior is a big thing. We've also got a lot of issues with competing values within the supply chain. That anyone who works with industry will know that's not a big surprise. But when we talk about these transitions to a circular economy, I think sometimes that's kind of ignored, that friction, and the fact that when you're dealing with a business and their only job is to make single-use plastics, and you're going, we're not going to do that anymore. They're like, okay, well, that's slightly problematic for us. And also the other thing we were looking at is the this lack of the technology to support that as well. So we're looking at cleaning assurance, for example. So if we're going to have a reuse system where you're washing things, you need a better system to certify that it's actually clean than currently what is used in industry, which predominantly is a little swab, ATP swabs, where you manually swab it to show that it's clean. Cheers. So I won't go into a lot of detail of how we're dealing with all these things, but suffice to say we're working with the M&S supply chain. So we've got M&S, there's the retailer, Klockner Pentaplast that make the plastic units, Multivac that make the machines that seal the things, and Hubbub, an NGO, predominantly in the environmental space. But yeah, we're looking at these ideas of tracking and cleaning. We're looking at supply chain value mapping. Where's the friction? Where do people not work together? Why is it that M&S do not speak to the recyclers about the things they're asking KP to make? Why does this not happen? And then we're looking at consumer behavior, things like, do people need to see the sandwiches in the sandwich box to buy a sandwich? Even simple things like that. Looking at. So as I said, we're working with M&S. We're going towards a live trial in store next year. We're currently working on the packaging. In fact, we had the workshop yesterday where we got to see the first lots of concepts emerge. I can't show you them, but we were quite excited by them. So it's one of those classic watch this space type placeholder things. Maybe next year I can show you the things. And I guess just the last thing really is, this is the question I always get is, oh, this seems a big project. Why is it led by design? Why not a real subject like engineering or polymer science or art or one of those subjects? And it's because design has its own abilities and its own skills and its own way of viewing the world that you don't get in the other disciplines. So one of them is frame creation. So we have alternative perspectives on what a problem might be and the potential solutions. We can design for change. So everything you interact with in the world influences the way you interact with them. So the way you design a bottle changes the way you interact with it. How do you know a bottle's a bottle? How do you know a chair's a chair? How do you know a table's a table? I've never sat on that chair before, but I'm pretty sure I can manage it through the way that it's designed. I'm not going to try that though. And then this idea of collaboration and translation. So we're very good at working across and between teams because we have to have this sort of understanding. And then just this idea again of curiosity. So this came out, this idea of reframing. So we had a workshop about labeling and with loads of different companies, and they kept talking about labels like they were just this. And then we're going, yes, but what is a label? And we started creating these new metaphors around labels. So could a scratch be a label? Could a dent, is that a label now? Is that an indicator, a signifier in some way? So through that, we've started to develop these ideas. And again, we're progressing these with a different university at the moment. But again, it's leading to different conceptions in that space, which wouldn't have happened if design hadn't been there to say, hang on, why are we all thinking this way? Why are we doing it this way? Can we do it different? So what's the next project? Well, basically, the thing that I'm open to collaborating with is a domain where the status quo has to be challenged and forced in some way, where things can't continue the same as they are, where new technological innovation is only going to get you so far, where you need a radical reframing of the problem, and basically where I can try my best. So I kind of say in my abstracts that I was going to do a tentative vision of my retirement. And then I Googled, there's a government website you can go to tell you the age in which you can claim state pension, 2049. So hopefully everyone will sort net zero by 2050, because that then means I have a very, very enjoyable retirement, hopefully. I wrote this little haiku late last night. It's gone all weird on the screen, but just something to leave you with. Thank you very much.